You're eating 1,500 calories a day. You've cut the bread. You've cut the sugar. You're doing everything the internet told you to do, and your belly hasn't moved an inch. If that's you, keep watching because you are not broken, and this is not your fault. What you are is diet resistant, and that word matters more than anything your scale has told you lately. Diet resistant doesn't mean you failed. It means your body learned to fight back, and nobody warned you it would do that. Here's the thing nobody talks about. After 65, the rules of calorie math stop working the way they used to. A 1,500 calorie deficit that melted fat off you at 45 can leave you completely stuck at 68. Same food, same willpower, completely different biology. Is this you? Because if it is, you're in exactly the right place. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why this happens. And more importantly, what's actually going on inside your body right now that your diet can't see. And I'm going to show you 3 specific shifts that people your age are using to finally start losing belly fat. Not in months, but in weeks. Let me tell you about Margaret. 71 years old, retired teacher. She'd been eating clean for almost 2 years. Chicken breast, salads, no alcohol, 1,500 calories, sometimes less. Her doctor told her to keep at it. Her scale hadn't moved in 8 months. She told me, I started to think my body just decided it was done. It wasn't done. Her body had shifted into a different mode entirely. And at week 6 of making one specific change, not fewer calories, a different kind of support, she lost 4 inches from her waist. Not because she tried harder, because she finally understood what her body was actually asking for. I'm going to show you exactly what that is. But first, you need to understand why 1,500 calories stopped working. Because until you understand the mechanism, no strategy will stick. Block 1. Why your body is protecting that belly fat. Here's what's happening inside you right now, and I want you to really hear this. Because once you understand it, the frustration starts to make sense. Your body doesn't see belly fat as a problem. It sees it as an emergency reserve. And the older you get, the more aggressively it guards that reserve, especially when it senses restriction. When you drop to 1,500 calories, your body doesn't say, great, let's burn the belly fat. It says, scarcity, danger, hold everything. And it has a very specific way of doing that. It lowers something called your resting metabolic rate, the number of calories your body burns, just to keep your heart beating, your lungs working, your cells running. After 60, this rate can drop significantly, and a study published in 2021, following over 600 adults aged 60 to 80, found that resting metabolic rate had declined by nearly 17% compared to adults in their 40s, independent of muscle mass changes. What that means for you: your body has quietly renegotiated what 1,500 calories means. What used to be a deficit is now, for your body, close to maintenance. You're not overeating, but you're not in a deficit either. Not a real one. Not in the way your cells are experiencing it. And here's where belly fat specifically becomes the last thing to move. Abdominal fat, the kind that sits deep inside the abdomen around your organs. What researchers call visceral fat, has a different hormonal profile than the fat on your arms or thighs. It is rich in a receptor called the beta-3 adrenergic receptor, which responds specifically to certain hormonal signals, particularly cortisol and insulin, to decide whether to release stored energy or hold on to it. After 65, 2 things happen simultaneously. Cortisol, your stress hormone, tends to run higher and stay elevated longer. And insulin sensitivity drops. meaning even a small amount of carbohydrate causes a larger insulin spike than it would have 10 years ago. The result? Your belly fat is receiving two very loud hormonal signals to stay right where it is, even when you're eating only 1,500 calories. This is not a willpower problem. This is a biology problem. And the solution is not fewer calories. The solution is changing the hormonal conversation your body is having. Now, I know that might sound complicated. It isn't, because there are three very specific, very practical ways to shift that conversation. And they're not about eating less, they're about eating differently. Before I get to those, let me introduce you to one thing most people over 65 are completely overlooking. And it's the reason so many people in your position stay stuck for months or years. It's not their diet, it's their cortisol pattern. Stay with me here, because what I'm about to explain is the mechanism behind Margaret's transformation. And it's something almost no one in the general health space talks about clearly. Cortisol is a survival hormone. When your brain perceives threat, stress, sleep disruption, undereating, inflammation, it releases cortisol to prepare your body for emergency action. In that emergency state, your body specifically prioritizes protecting abdominal fat because, evolutionarily, that fat is the fastest source of energy in a real survival crisis. Here's the cruel irony. When you restrict your calories aggressively and your body is already stressed, from poor sleep, from chronic low-grade inflammation, from joint pain, from the quiet anxiety that comes with aging, your cortisol goes up. And high cortisol tells your belly fat, do not move. We might need you. So your diet is actually making the problem worse, not better. Not because you're doing something wrong, because the restriction itself is being read as a threat. A 2019 study from the University of California followed 82 adults with an average age of 67 through a 12-week caloric restriction program. Those with the highest cortisol levels at the start lost significantly less abdominal fat than those with lower cortisol, even when their calorie intake was identical. The researchers concluded that cortisol management may be as important as caloric restriction for abdominal fat loss in older adults. Let that sink in for a moment. Same food, same effort, different hormonal environment, completely different results. This is why two people can follow the same 1,500 calorie plan, and one of them loses belly fat and one of them doesn't. It's not metabolism luck, it's cortisol. Now that you understand why this happens, let's talk about what actually works. Three specific shifts. And I want to be clear, these are not harder than what you're already doing. In most cases, they're easier because they're about working with your biology instead of fighting it. Block 2, the three shifts that change everything. Shift 1. Stop treating all 1,500 calories the same. This is the mistake almost everyone makes, and it's costing you results. Here's what I mean. Two people eat 1,500 calories. Person A eats them spread evenly across the day with consistent protein at each meal. Person B eats most of their calories in two larger meals with a longer gap in between. Same calories, but their bodies are having very different conversations. Here's why this matters after 65. After round 60, your muscles become less responsive to protein, what researchers call anabolic resistance. That means you need more protein per meal, not just more protein overall, to actually stimulate muscle maintenance and repair. And why does muscle matter for belly fat? Because muscle tissue is your primary metabolic burner. Every pound of muscle you lose, and after 60, most people lose half a pound to a full pound of muscle per year without specific effort to prevent it. your resting metabolic rate drops further, which means your 1,500 calorie intake slips further from a deficit into maintenance. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition followed adults aged 60 to 75 and found that distributing protein intake more evenly, at least 30 grams per meal across 3 meals, preserved lean muscle mass significantly better than higher total protein consumed unevenly. More muscle preserved meant higher resting metabolic rate. Higher resting metabolic rate meant more belly fat lost over 12 weeks on the same total caloric intake. What this means for you practically: look at your day. Do you have 30 grams of protein at breakfast? That's roughly 4 eggs, or a cup of Greek yogurt plus a palm-sized serving of chicken. Most people over 65 get almost no protein at breakfast and pile it at dinner. That single shift, moving protein earlier and distributing it, has been shown to protect the muscle tissue that is quietly determining how many calories your body burns while you sleep. And a word here about something nobody wants to say plainly. If you're eating 1,500 calories with very little protein, you're likely losing muscle, not fat. The number on the scale might even drop, but your belly doesn't shrink because what you're losing isn't what you're trying to lose. Does this sound familiar? Because if it does, comment protein below. I want to know how many of you are dealing with this right now. And if low energy is your biggest challenge, comment energy. I read every single one, and your answers shape exactly what I cover next. Shift 2, the breakfast timing window. This is where things get genuinely surprising and where I want to challenge something you've probably been told. Most conventional diet advice says, eat less, eat often, keep your metabolism going. Small meals throughout the day. Don't skip breakfast. Keep that furnace burning. For people under 50, that advice has some logic. For people over 65 dealing with insulin resistance and elevated cortisol, that advice may actually be making your belly fat problem worse. Here's why. Every time you eat anything, including a small healthy snack, you trigger an insulin response. Insulin's job is to manage blood sugar, but its secondary job is to signal your fat cells to not release stored energy. When insulin is present, fat burning essentially pauses. If you're eating small amounts every 2 to 3 hours, your insulin never fully drops. You are, in effect, keeping a hormonal brake on fat burning for most of your waking day. Contrast that with a pattern where you eat your first meal a little later, say 10 in the morning instead of 7, and you have your last meal by 7 in the evening. That's a 13-hour window overnight and into the morning where insulin has fully cleared, cortisol has had time to normalize, and your body has uninterrupted access to your fat stores, including that abdominal reserve. This approach is sometimes called time-restricted eating, and I want to be careful here about how I frame this for you. This is not aggressive fasting. This is not skipping meals. It is a gentle compression of your eating window that, for many people over 65, requires no change in what they eat, only when. A study published in Cell Metabolism in 2019 followed overweight adults over the age of 60 through 8 weeks of time-restricted eating without any caloric restriction. Participants showed a meaningful reduction in abdominal fat, lower fasting insulin, and lower cortisol patterns without changing what they ate at all. Now, is this right for everyone? No. And I want to say this clearly. If you have blood sugar management issues, if you are on medication that requires food at specific times, if you have a history of disordered eating, please speak with your doctor before adjusting your eating window. Your situation is specific, and a general approach is not always the right approach. But for many people in this position, eating 1,500 calories and seeing no movement in belly fat. The problem isn't the calories, it's the hormonal environment those calories are creating. And adjusting the timing carefully and gently changes that environment. Margaret's change, by the way, was exactly this. She shifted her first meal from 7:30 in the morning to 9:30. That was it. No calorie changes, no new foods, just a 2-hour delay. And it was enough to allow her insulin to fully clear each morning before she ate, which allowed her cortisol to settle, which allowed her belly fat to finally start responding. At week 6, 4 inches gone. Not because she starved herself, because she finally stopped sending her body the wrong signals. Block 3, the shift nobody talks about, and why it's the one that matters most. Here's mistake number 3, and this is the one I see almost universally in people who are diet resistant. They are focused entirely on what they eat and how much they eat. They have completely ignored what their body is doing with the food, the downstream process that determines whether nutrients become fuel or become stored fat. And the missing piece is something called insulin sensitivity at the cellular level. Let me explain this as clearly as I can, because it's simpler than it sounds. Think of insulin as a key, and think of your cells, your muscle cells, your organ cells, as having locks. When the key fits perfectly, insulin opens the door, glucose enters the cell and gets burned as fuel, and blood sugar drops appropriately. Your belly fat gets no signal to hold on. When those locks become stiff, which happens progressively after 60, accelerated by inactivity, chronic inflammation, and poor sleep, insulin has to knock louder. Your pancreas releases more insulin. More insulin means more of the signal that tells fat cells to hold on. More of that signal specifically around the abdomen. This is insulin resistance, and it is far more common in people over 65 than is widely understood. It exists on a spectrum. You don't have to be diabetic for insulin resistance be silently preventing your belly fat from moving. Here's what makes this genuinely urgent. Insulin resistance doesn't just affect fat storage. It accelerates the inflammatory processes that contribute to joint pain, fatigue, brain fog, and metabolic slowdown. Every day your cells are bathing in excess insulin is a day your body is getting a signal to conserve rather than burn, not just in your belly, but system wide. So, how do you restore insulin sensitivity? 3 things. And the first one will surprise you. The most powerful single intervention for restoring cellular insulin sensitivity in adults over 60 is not a supplement and not a dietary change. It is low intensity movement after eating, not a gym session, not a mile-long walk. A 10 to 15-minute gentle walk within 30 minutes of finishing a meal. A study published in Diabetes Care followed adults over 60 with metabolic syndrome. Those who walked for 15 minutes after each of their 3 daily meals showed a 41% greater reduction in post-meal blood sugar spikes compared to those who did a single 30-minute walk once per day. Same total movement time, radically different metabolic outcome. What that means for you. A gentle walk after lunch or dinner is not just good for your joints. It is directly intercepting the blood sugar spike that leads to excess insulin, that leads to the fat holding signal that has been keeping your belly exactly where it is. You don't need to sweat. You don't need special shoes. You need 15 minutes and a sidewalk or even a hallway. The second thing that restores insulin sensitivity is sleep quality, specifically deep sleep. During deep sleep, your body clears inflammatory markers, resets cortisol, and performs a process called glycogen restoration, where muscle cells actively pull glucose out of the bloodstream. Adults over 65 who sleep fewer than 6 hours per night show significantly higher fasting insulin levels the following morning, meaning they start every day with the fat storing signal already elevated before they eat a single calorie. If you are sleeping poorly, and I know many of you are, because joint pain and nighttime waking are extraordinarily common after 65, this is not a minor factor. This is potentially the single most powerful lever for shifting your body from fat storing mode to fat burning mode. Not a supplement, not a food, sleep. The third thing is dietary fiber, specifically prebiotic fiber. This is where gut health enters the picture. And I want to spend a moment here because the research in the last 5 years has fundamentally changed what we know about belly fat and the microbiome. Your gut microbiome, the community of bacteria in your digestive system, directly influences both cortisol levels and insulin sensitivity through the gut brain axis. Specific strains of bacteria produce short chain fatty acids when they ferment certain types of fiber. Those short chain fatty acids reduce gut inflammation, lower cortisol signaling, and improve how sensitively your muscle cells respond to insulin. In other words, your belly fat is partly being governed by what's living in your gut. And the typical diet of a person over 65, often lower in vegetables and diverse fiber sources because of convenience, appetite changes, or digestive sensitivity, may be chronically underfeeding the bacteria that are supposed to be protecting you from exactly this. The practical change here is not dramatic. Adding one additional daily serving of prebiotic rich food, green bananas, cooked and cooled potatoes, legumes, Jerusalem artichoke, or asparagus has been shown in multiple studies to measurably shift gut bacterial composition within as few as 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That's not a long term process. That's early signals. Bonus, the one thing you can do today. Before you go, I promise you something extra. Here's one thing you can do right now. Not next week. Today. After your next meal, any meal, get up and walk for 15 minutes. Gently, no effort required, just movement. That walk will intercept the blood sugar spike from that meal. It will lower the insulin response by a meaningful amount. It will send your belly fat a different signal than it's been receiving. And if you do it after every meal for the next 2 weeks, you will have made more metabolic progress than 6 months of counting calories alone. Most people skip this because it sounds too simple. The people who don't skip it are the ones who start feeling the difference first. Let me bring this all together for you, because I want to make sure nothing here got lost. You are eating 1,500 calories and your belly isn't moving. That is not a failure of willpower. That is your body, specifically the hormonal environment inside your body, responding to restriction, stress, and age-related metabolic shifts in a way that prioritizes abdominal fat protection. The three things that change that environment are distributing your protein more evenly across the day to protect the muscle that drives your metabolism, gently shifting your eating window to allow insulin to clear fully and cortisol to normalize each morning, and restoring cellular insulin sensitivity through post-meal movement, sleep quality, and prebiotic fiber. None of these require eating less. None of these require more effort than you're already giving. Every single one of them is backed by research specifically done with adults in your age group. And every single one of them begins showing early signals in weeks, not months. You don't have to figure this out alone. And you don't have to wait long to feel a difference. If this video helped you see something you hadn't seen before, please hit the like button. It takes 1 second and it helps someone else your age who is sitting exactly where you were sitting find this information. If you know someone dealing with this, a friend, a spouse, a sibling who has been stuck despite doing everything right, share this with them. You might give them something their doctor hasn't taken the time to explain. And subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. In the next episode, I'm going to go deeper on the cortisol belly fat connection specifically, including the one sleep habit that may be the reason you're waking up with a higher stress response than you went to bed with. If today's video surprised you, that one is going to change how you think about your mornings entirely. Comment diet below if calorie restriction has been your main strategy. Comment sleep below if poor sleep is something you've been dealing with. I read every single comment, and your answers tell me exactly what to cover next. Consistency matters more than intensity. Always. Small shifts, repeated over weeks, create the kind of change you can actually feel and actually keep. It's not too late, and you don't have to wait long to feel the difference.